Hi, thank you for sending me your thoughts. Those were really interesting. I'm going to post this on YouTube so I can share it with a few other people. So, just for those, I have this friend in Germany who we've been exchanging some ideas on philosophy, pedagogy, and basically how to bring these ideas to the broader Western population, right? We're both white. We both have European heritage. We're like that's kind of our major culture group, and how to change it for the better, to in the sense that, from my particular perspective, in the sense of like decolonization, how do we decolonize, de-imperialize our people's culture? Um, and so he was talking about, my German friend was talking about, uh, first talking about Jung and Nietzsche. Okay, looking at these big, hard topics, it's easy to get lost in them. You stare into the abyss stares back. Having to keep yourself grounded, and then how do you transmit what you've learned to other people, right? Because he talked about um, with mass media, it's easy to send info, but that doesn't necessarily mean people will internalize it. He used the word like to properly transmit information, you have to do something else. And what I think that is the transmission is internalization. So to internalize, um, like that's the goal, is for this information not to just be consumed, but to be internalized, because that leads to action, which leads to change, right? And so how do we do that? And I want to use, his discussion was very theoretical, and I want to take that theory and create a practical application. So it's November just finished, so here in the United States we just had Thanksgiving. Right, popular holiday, but it's also a settler colonial holiday. And I know there is sensitivity to that, especially within the Montessori community. And it's like, well, we're celebrating. We just try and celebrate, like the gathering of people, the good cheer, the things holidays are supposed to be about. These positive things, and that is good, and that is progress. But that still doesn't deal with the fact that Thanksgiving is a settler colonial holiday and like all the mythos surrounding it. So talking about the Pilgrims, right? Talking about Squanto, talking about like all of that stuff is a myth, right? Like the historical evidence points out the falsehoods and the whitewashing that narrative has created. And to highlight this, indigenous, a lot of leftists don't celebrate Thanksgiving for these reasons. Indigenous communities I've seen online are like explicitly like, it's a day of remembrance for them, right? Of the tragedy, the evils perpetrated by the settler colonial society that took their land, right? And celebration of Thanksgiving at all is seen as an endorsement of this, right? And it's one of those banality of evil things, because it's like, even if you are not, even if you are woke, as it were, and you don't support settler colonialism in theory, by aligning yourself with this part of the American mythos. You are endorsing the settler colonial state, right? And this is one of those things is like, good people can be evil through supporting evil systems. So when I'm talking about, okay, so my practical example then is like, okay, what have I learned that I want to give to the people in my community for them to internalize to combat this issue? Now, I've had a lot of thoughts about this. Well, you could say, well, don't celebrate Thanksgiving at all. Just have, just have your harvest festival. Just celebrate the equinox. Just celebrate some other holiday that happens at that time. This is an option. I think this is an option that a lot of leftists follow through. But I still find that problematic because it does not address the original wrong, which was this murder, the genocide, the stealing of the land. Excuse me. So rather than say, don't celebrate Thanksgiving at all, I think we should reclaim it, from like a liberation movement standpoint, and make it about those things. Make Thanksgiving not about like, oh, we got the help from the Indians and that's so good and da-da-da-da-da. Make it a time for, as the indigenous communities do, where it is a time of remembrance, it is a time of mourning, right? And then the day after they have Indigenous Heritage Day, and that can be a time of celebration, is to use our holiday as white people as a time for education, for truth-telling, and for reconciliation. So, the way I would do this is, instead of having, it's Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving, or telling the Pilgrim story, or kind of giving this whitewashed view of history, even with young kids, right? Because I'll get to that in a minute. There's a book called "We Are All Treaty People," and I think it's published by the Anishinaabeg in Canada, or what is now known as Canada. And this book is the story of colonization from the indigenous point of view, specifically from the Anishinaabeg point of view. And it's written for children, right? This is a children's book. And now I think if I showed this to a lot of white teachers, they would say, well, maybe middle school, maybe high school for this book. But no, I think this is a second plane appropriate material. And and my reasoning for this is I look at black communities, right? What age does the kid get sat down and told about the dangers of police, right? In white schools, you have the police officer come in, and the police officer is everyone's friends. But for a lot of black communities, learning how to deal with police as a dangerous authority is a survival skill. And you have to learn that from a really young age. So I think it is a level of white privilege that we need to do away with, to say, well, we can't talk about these hard topics with young kids. Oh, because they can't understand it. Because they absolutely can, right? Because we see it happen in other communities. And like, indigenous kids grow up knowing the loss that their community has suffered. And they may not be able to like explain it in a college level dissertation, but the emotional understanding, the innate understanding, the instinctual understanding is there. And that's what we're trying to convey at this age. And thus, I do not think we should shield second plane children from the harsh realities of our life, of like, our people have done some evil, evil stuff that we have never made right here in the United States. I think kids should know that, not because of shame, not because I want them to feel bad, but because I think the sense of justice experienced in the second plane will drive these individuals to make right these wrongs our ancestors have created, and they will take pride in doing that work, and they will feel better about themselves, like selfishly, because they know they are making that positive impact in the world that sense of justice drives. So I think that second plane is the perfect time to talk about these big issues like genocide, colonialism, slavery, racism, right? Is because we are feeding that sense of justice to make real change. So what do? We take We Are All Treaty People, and we read that book, right? We read it, and that can become a holiday tradition, right? So instead of reading your normal Thanksgiving books, we read We Are All Treaty People, and we have discussions about it, right? And the important part, I think, of this discussion is because there's a comparison and a contrast within the book between the indigenous view and the colonial view. Like, that's a central theme to the book, is looking at how indigenous people got screwed over because there's such a different understanding of what a treaty and a contract is between the two cultures. And this will allow us to see why the colonial view is toxic, or in Montessori terms, is deviant. It's not normal. It is not in harmony with the rest of the system. So, like, in this way, colonialism and imperialism, I think, according to Montessori principles, is not normal, right? Because if you look at, because they are societal extensions of the individual deviations she talks about in her chapter on psychic deviations, right? The need for control, fear, possessiveness, right? These are deviations that are brought on by stressors, and, like, in my view, societies are a Gestalt reflection of all their individual members. Again, I think Montessori supports this with her understanding of society. And so if you have a culture that promotes these psychic deviations, the society it builds will then apply those deviations at a systemic level. And what this discussion will help us do is renormalize, right? Because it is untangling that ball, right? You know, she talks about in children, you don't necessarily have to do that because they're still growing, but as an adult, your things get so tangled up, and to heal yourself, it's to untangle that messy knot of emotions and experiences and ideas, right? So the goal of this discussion then is normalization. Right, and again, it's not saying we are bad people because we did bad things as white people, right? Because that's a lot of the pushback. It's like, I don't want my kid to feel guilty about da-da-da-da. It's not about that. It is about understanding our history, and allowing us to take, because I feel like I can't be proud, like, you can't be proud about being white, and I think that bothers people, right? Like, you can't be proud about being American. Like, you are, but, like, internationally and to a lot of other Americans, you're kind of looked at as, like, a nationalist buffoon, and, like, you don't understand the history of our nation. But by doing this, and by allowing the children and the adults who are participating in this to take ownership of the wrongs, to take responsibility of the wrongs, and to enact something to change that, there is something to take pride in. I think if you're doing that, then you can say, I'm proud to be an American, right? If we make this an American tradition, or I'm proud to be a Montessorian, right? Or I'm proud to be white, if by some weird freak thing that ends up being an okay thing to say. I think as we do our healing, we'll find the racialization categories we've created for ourselves to be less and less useful, because their primary purpose is to serve as tools for domination and control. So read this book to the kids, talk about it, learn the history, and it's like, it's on us to do our research, right? So like, I will happily provide links and lists to indigenous voices that have kindly shared their thoughts and their history on the internet. But we cannot expect them to come to us and tell us what to do, right? And I think as American educators, all of us, especially in the Montessori field, where most of us are much more privileged, and the kids we work with are much more privileged, it is our responsibility to take this on. And like, because I think a lot of the feedback I get is like, well, you can do that when you have your own school. No. This is not an individual task for me to take on. This is a task for us to take on as a people. And if you are going to do more than pay lip service to the idea of solidarity, participate in this. So to that end, hi Laurie, I'm sending this to you. How do we get this enacted? Well, we can go to the website where they sell this book. I'll try and put a link to it in the description if I remember. It's $25 a copy, right? So I would be okay putting together a GoFundMe or a some sort of crowdfunding, sharing it within the Montessori community, and buying 100 of those books and giving them to classrooms. So Hershey has, we won't count young child community. Hershey has 3. Well, no, I said second place. We'll start at second place. There's 4 second-place communities. So 4 copies of the book for Hershey, maybe 2 more copies for the middle school and the high school, right? Roughing is around here. How many Montessori schools are there just in Ohio that have second plane environments? And we buy 100 copies from the indigenous publisher, right? So in that sense, this is part of a reparation, right? Like we're not asking them to give this to us, right? We could just use, if money's not viable, they have kindly put a full reading of the book with all of the pictures on the internet for free in the form of a YouTube video. So like, there's no excuse not to do this, right? And then if hopefully maybe in doing this, we place a large enough order, we can start forming a relationship with the publisher and see what other materials, can we use to help decolonize our classroom and to give back what we have taken, in some ways. And so like, this is the kind of societal change that we need to have in our culture to make right on these issues. And decolonization is not just about making right our wrongs with indigenous people. It's also about making rights with the wrongs we've committed with slavery and the Black community, about the harm we have done to the ecosystem, that our way of life has done to the ecosystem. And really, decolonization is about changing our way of life in substantial, meaningful ways, which is probably going to be really uncomfortable for us in the beginning. But I think we'll see long-term benefits, better long-term health, better long-term happiness, sustainability, and survivability of our people. So really, you're like, oh, we don't want to help the indigenous people. This is a selfish thing. We're doing this for us. And I think that, like, when it comes to mutual aid, you have to do something. It has to be practiced in a selfish manner, because otherwise it's charity. And it's like, well, I'm not actually trying to endanger my position or what I'm trying to do. Like, you have to have skin in the game, right? When you're doing these things and trying to make these changes. Anyways, this video is way longer than I was intending it to be, so I'm gonna stop rambling now. I hope that makes sense. Really, like, and this is just one idea, right? There's lots of ways we can do this, but like, in particular, how do we reclaim Thanksgiving? We tell the indigenous story using indigenous voices, and we see where we went wrong, and we make that part of the tradition. And then the food and celebration can still be there, but that is a coming together, not in thanks of, oh, you helped us out while we were murdering you, in a reconciliation, right? A celebration of like, look, we're doing the hard work of healing. We all deserve a treat. So we're going to have some good food and good company afterwards. And so that's how I would change Thanksgiving to make it make it a tool for decolonization. And I really hope that this is adopted by my peers in education. Because also my German friend mentioned, looking at different zeitgeists for collecting these ideas. I think one of the most powerful zeitgeists that I have access to is the Montessori zeitgeist, or the Montessori institutions. And then extending beyond that, education in general. I think this is the place where the biggest change can happen. And explaining why will be a whole nother video. So like I said, I'm going to finish this. I hope you found this interesting, you learned something, and you take these ideas to heart. Bye.